show live on News Talk 830 WCCO that I'll be co-hosting with Joe Anderson. And beginning next Monday, September 9th, live at B52 Burgers and Brew, and leading into Monday Night Football, be co-hosting with All-Pro safety Harrison Smith of the Vikings, our guest on the first regular season show, and we'll have other guys during the season, other Viking players. And so really excited about the show, excited about B52 Burgers and Brew. And at the first show, we'll talk about the Falcons game with Harrison and preview the Packers Week 2 game in Green Bay, and also hit NFL hot topics that we do week to week. And I encourage everyone to go to B52 Burgers and Brew in Inver Grove Heights and Lakefield. They have a terrific menu, 25 varieties of burgers and great entrees and appetizers. And as I said, our home of Monday Night Purple. They'll have Monday night specials. They have a great rooftop patio and a fantastic Sunday brunch. Check out their website, b52burgersandbrew.com, and hope to see you there.
So what do you make of Jerry Jones' cap management and roster management at this point?
Wow, they've got some big salary guys, but I guess the Vikings have kind of been through that drill over the last few years, and all their 10 million plus players, and now the Cowboys are kind of in that boat too. And yeah, I think the most surprising thing to me is that the Prescott deal is not done yet. And you're talking about your starting quarterback who's supposed to make $2 million this year, and he's looking around the league and seeing Jared Goff get signed for $30-some million a year, Carson Wentz, all these guys that were kind of his contemporaries, and that perhaps he's outperformed to a certain extent. Maybe not Goff, he got to a Super Bowl, but Dak Prescott has a 32-16 record as a starter. He's a two-time Pro Bowler, and he's got to be holding his hand up. Hey, Jerry, what about me? And so we'll see how that shakes out. The rumblings were that he was asking for $40 million a year, which I never really quite believed that.
Right.
But I'm sure he's looking for something in the mid-30s, and because he'll be forced to play out this year at $2 million. So whatever the extension is, you got to factor in that $2 million this year, and that knocks the average down. But I think Dak Prescott will get done, and it could even be this week or certainly by early next week. And yeah, they've got a lot of cap management work to do and moving around, and they signed Lyle Collins, one of their top offensive tackles, to a 5-year extension. Did Jalen Smith recently, and they're still looking at Amari Cooper next year probably. He's already making $14 million this year, but he'll be a free agent. He could be franchised next year. And yeah, so you got Zeke Elliott. I would have never really predicted that he would be the first of that big three to get signed.
Right.
I figured we'd be Prescott first, and I thought Zeke, they may force him to wait a year, but went ahead and got it done. And he obviously is of critical importance to their team. Led the NFL in rushing last year, and so we'll see how that all develops and how they manage that. And there's also another interesting contract that's kind of on the horizon around the NFL, and we're talking about Julio Jones, who has not gotten his extension done yet, and who will obviously be the highest paid receiver in the league when he gets it done, and he'll jump Michael Thomas in that $20 million a year range, but not done yet. And how does that impact him and his thinking going into Sunday's game opener against the Vikings? And perhaps the Vikings and Mike Zimmer are hoping maybe he doesn't get that done quite yet, and he's got kind of a little bit distracted perhaps going into the opener. So we'll see how it shakes out. But Julio Jones, another guy. And when you talk about Julio Jones, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this game too as we go on, but Xavier Rhodes is a guy that I'll be watching very closely on Sunday because he's got quite the assignment the first 3 weeks of the season. And you talk about he's taking on Julio Jones week 1. He's got Devontae Adams in Green Bay week 2, and then Antonio Brown week 3 with the Raiders if Antonio shows up.
Well,
he's upset now. The Raiders fined him $50,000.
I know. How about that?
Yeah, he's only making $18 million a year, but they fined me $50,000. How dare they do that when I skip training camp and all this stuff? But you also mentioned the Houston Texans, Jim, and wow, I think that is just a train wreck that's been going on there. And to me, it kind of started with the passing of their owner Bob McNair, who I had a lot of respect for as an owner. I thought he put the franchise together really well from day one, and they operated very efficiently, always had a plan. And when he passed away, his widow Janice and his son Cal took over the majority ownership. And I wrote in SportingNews.com today that I think they're basically asleep at the wheel. and letting. First of all, they screwed up the GM hire. They fire a GM in June, Brian Gain. They screw up the new hire, and they can't get Nick Caserio from the Patriots. Had to face a possible grievance there, and maybe they'll get him there next year. We'll see. But they turned the power over to O'Brien, and which is always dangerous when you give it to a coach who's really interested in now, short term, not long term. So what does he do? He goes trades 2 number 1s and a number 2 for Laramie Tunsil and Kenny Stills, but Kenny Stills very average receiver. So it's really for Tunsil, and a very high price to pay for an offensive tackle, even if you think he potentially can be a top 10 tackle, and he probably can be, but hasn't necessarily played fantastic at this point. I think the thing he's most famous for is the bong photo.
That is true.
Before the draft.
Now, I feel bad for him. He's somebody in his own family is trying to sell him out. So I feel bad for the guy. And I'm sure there are a lot of college football players who use bongs and don't get caught right before the draft.
Right.
So I find him to be a sympathetic figure, and I think he's got some talent. But is he good right now? I'll let you be the judge of that.
Yeah, I think it's time will tell. But he's definitely an upgrade. So you can't say it's a bad move to trade for him. But to give 2 1s and a 2, I'd say that's very questionable.
Yeah,
because you're mortgaging the future of the franchise for an offensive tackle. And I think the most ridiculous thing they did as part of that deal is that they didn't get an extension signed with him as part of the deal to make him take the trade. They didn't get him extended, so he can be a free agent in 2 years, or they can franchise him and go through that mess. Why would you not, if you think he's that good and you've invested this much draft capital in him, get him extended. Mm-hmm. And if Nate Solder's making 15 some million a year, then I guess Tunsil's going to be worth that someday. And so now what they did, they increased Tunsil's leverage, because now Tunsil and his agent can say, whoa, look what you gave up for me. You don't want me to walk away in 2 years. And so that's a really bad play contract-wise by the Texans. And then, of course, the Jadeveon Clowney situation. And I think Clowney is a great talent. Has he lived up to expectations as the number 1 pick in the draft? Not necessarily, but he's been getting better. He had 9.5 sacks 2 years ago, 9 sacks last year, and certainly a great bookend for J.J. Watt. And then, so what happens? Again, you got a coach who's in charge of personnel, and he's thinking, he's saying he's not going to show up, which I'll debate that because I thought he would show up anyway. But he's saying, I'm never going to show up there because you didn't do the long-term deal with me. So he trades him away for a couple of middling players, and you lose Clowney, who I think he would have shown up this week. He's not going to give up $15.5 million. Right. He's not going to pull a Le'Veon Bell, and he knows he could be a free agent next year or be franchised again, whatever. And so I think he misplayed that one. And then to top it all off, put the cherry on top. Okay, Seattle, we're going to give you a great pass rusher potentially that can help you possibly beat out the Rams in the NFC West, but we're going to pay $7 million towards his salary this year. What? Are you kidding me? Why would you do that? Crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's just so obvious you need a separation of powers. Tom Thibodeau is a good basketball coach, and he's basically got himself fired because of the way he handled the Jimmy Butler thing, because he loved Jimmy Butler, and that's the way a coach thinks. You need a separation of powers. Maybe, we can find the very rare occasion where it works, but the odds are so much against it.
Yeah, it is. It's such a tough job to do both, and I think
it's hard to do either.
It's hard to do either, right, and try to do both. And there's one guy today that is doing it, both of them, and that's Bill Belichick, and he's doing a heck of a job, but he's a unique guy.
And you could even argue that his personnel decisions have not necessarily been great, but he just coaches through them.
Yes, he does, and he's got Tom Brady to help him do it, and that's always good too. And so, but yeah, you think historically, how many guys have been able to do that? George Halas, Paul Brown back in the day, Vince Lombardi, and Bill Walsh, and Bill Parcells to a certain extent had that power. At the Jets, I would say he had the power.
But he won his championships when George Young was his GM.
That's exactly right. So there's only a handful of people that can do that. I don't think Bill O'Brien's in that class, and I think that these deals with Clowney and Tunsil are eventually going to hurt the franchise long term. And as I said, I'll put the blame on ownership and on Janice and Kelt McNair for not having a little more control over what's going on with their coach and not getting a new GM in there if they were going to fire their GM in June.
Let's wrap this show up with predictions, both the week 1 prediction and the season prediction. Listen to Jeff's, maybe want to change all mine, but I'm going to stick with what I said on our other Viking show at TalkNorth.com. By the way, thank you again to White Bear Lake Superstore and to B52 Burgers and Brew. We also have a deal with Bitesquad. Promo code TalkNorth gets your first delivery fee waived. Home, office, elsewhere, breakfast, lunch, dinner, late night, ice cream, snacks, whatever you want, bitesquad.com. And please go also onto iTunes or wherever you listen to these podcasts. Subscribe to Talk North and rate us, rip us, favorite us, whatever you want to do in terms of the social media aspect of all of this. Jeff, I'll tell you what my predictions were. I think the offenses are going to be pretty hot on Sunday at U.S. Bank Stadium. I picked Vikings to win 31-23. Listening to you made me want to flip it, but I'm going to stick by that pick, and I'm picking the Vikings to go 9-6-1 this year and make the playoffs.
Okay. Well, I'm still picking the Vikings to win. I think it's going to be closer than 8 points. I'm going to say a field goal, and
you're making a lot of people nervous.
I know. I'm going to say Dan Bailey makes the winning field goal in this game, and I'm going to say 27-24 Vikings. The first game of the season is always kind of interesting, especially with players who have not played a full game all season, and how good is the tackling at this stage of the game, and so we'll see. But I think it's a close game. I think it's a close matchup. And I feel like the home field gives the Vikings the edge in this game at U.S. Bank Stadium. And so I'm going to give him a 3-point win and let Dan Bailey boot the winning field goal, and then it'll be on to Green Bay. I think for the season, I've got the Vikings. I'm kind of waffling between 10-6 and 11-5. I think 11-5 is maybe a little bit of a stretch because it's just the schedule is so difficult in that second half of the season when they go to Kansas City and to Dallas and to the Chargers and to Seattle. And I think the really important part of the season, get off to a good start. I think this opener takes on really big importance for them. They need to get off to a good start. I think they need to go at least 6-2 in the first half of the season, and then it's going to get really tougher down that second half of the season. So I'm going to take a stretch and say 11-5 and say they win the NFC North by a hair over the Bears and win the last game it'll come down to. And I think the difference to me, I know the Bears defense is stout. I think the Vikings offensive line will be better. They've got to stay healthy. If they don't stay healthy, then I think all bets are off in terms of picking them over the Bears. But I think that Mitchell Trubisky, I'm not quite thinking he's there yet as far as an elite quarterback and can do it. And I think Cousins will be better in year 2 with a hopefully healthy Dalvin Cook and with a better offensive line and the play-action game of Stefanski and Kubiak and the zone blocking scheme. It'll be really interesting, but I think 27-24 sounds good to me in the opener, and we'll see how that develops, but I think it's going to be a close game.
It's going to be a fascinating season because they're all fascinating seasons.
Yes.
That's what the NFL and the Vikings both have going for them. We know whatever happens is going to be interesting. So stick with us, both the Viking Update Show and Jeff Diamond's Vikings and NFL Insider at TalkNorth.com. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app. We'll be back next week to review Week 1, preview Week 2, which is a game at Lambeau Field. I think there might be some interest in that.